Hi, this is Shauna, the CEO and founder of Fuel Talent. One of the things I have loved most in my 25-year recruiting career has always been the stories that people tell. Stories of leadership, career choices, company ideas, and team building. My inspiration for starting the What Fuels You podcast came from being curious about people's lives and wanting to help share their stories. What path brought them to this place? What decisions did they make that led to failures and successes? Who influenced those decisions, and what lessons were learned along the way? I hope you enjoy the What Fuels You podcast. Today's guest on the What Fuels You podcast is Nick Huzar. Nick is the CEO and co-founder of one of Seattle's most successful consumer startups, OfferUp. OfferUp was founded in 2011 by Nick following his experience starting two other companies, Connex and DealSpringer, and stints at Microsoft and T-Mobile. 8 years and 85 million downloads later, OfferUp is the largest mobile marketplace in the U.S. with a mission to build the largest, simplest, and most trustworthy local marketplace. In several major cities, including Seattle, more than 15% of the local population uses the app to buy and sell every month, and it's a top 5 shopping app in the App Store and Google Play. Nick is also a husband and father. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Okay, we're starting with a little rapid fire. We were just talking about working out. So what's your favorite way to exercise?
Well, I get bored pretty easily, so I think the more important thing for me is just consistency in doing something physical as much as I possibly can. So, I mix it up. Any given day, I'll sometimes just go for a run. I use jump ropes quite a bit, a lot of weights. And to be honest, most days I don't even think about what I'm going to do until I kind of get to the gym.
And you go to the gym to do it?
Yeah, I go to the gym.
That's awesome.
Usually, I live on a mountain, so I walk around there quite a bit. But I just try to do something physical for my own time, and I find that when I was younger, I probably did it more for our parents. Now I just do it for my own sanity, really.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. What was the first item you ever sold on OfferUp?
First item I ever sold was probably kids' clothes. I had a young daughter, and was selling a bunch of her early baby.
That was
stuff.
What you put on there.
Yep.
If you could attend any concert and sit in the front row, which one would you choose?
System of a Down.
Oh. What?
I like concerts that are physically engaging, and so I think that one would be a workout. Like that one would be intense.
All right. What is your best trait?
I think it depends on who you ask.
Well, in your opinion, what do you like most
I would
about
say
yourself?
I'm pretty determined and tenacious. Like there's no quitting. So I think if you're an entrepreneur, success is not a straight line, and so I tend to just persevere.
Nice. Okay, Nick, do you have any nicknames?
I don't.
You don't have any nicknames?
yes.
Can I call you Nicky? Nick Meister?
Maybe my aunt calls me that. But,
Nickster?
you can ask around the office.
Nobody's calling you a nickname?
I don't think so.
Maybe behind your back.
Yeah, exactly. There's in secret, maybe.
Not even your friends don't have a nickname?
No.
Oh my gosh.
No.
Lucky you. I don't want to tell you mine. Okay, what is your biggest fear?
Most days I wake up and I think about the end of my life and looking back and wanting, making sure I do the things I wanted to do, making sure I left it all out there on the field. I think that's it. Like, I don't want to look back and felt like I have regrets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes total sense to me. Is there a habit that you're currently trying to break?
There's a balance of, being a CEO and an entrepreneur of patience and pushing. And I find I struggle with that a lot. I'm pretty dang impatient, and sometimes you need to have patience. So I think there's a tension there, but I don't think you don't want a CEO of a startup to be too patient.
No, it almost seems like the opposite. And not that it would be complacency, but I get that. I'd rather work for somebody that's impatient because I'd be like, urgency is important.
Yeah, I tend to get feedback that people want me to slow down, and usually my response is, no, you need to speed up. So
Yeah.
I think there's a tension there for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so we're done with our rapid fire. You did great.
Great. I'm sweating. I got to wipe the sweat off my brow.
That's your workout for the day. Did you already work out today?
I did.
Oh, good for you.
Lots of jump rope.
Nice. Jump rope's hard. How long do you go for?
I usually go into the racquetball area, and I do 5 sets of like at least a minute each, and then I'll do push-ups in between. I just go
And
back
do you
to
listen
back.
to music?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
the whole
good.
time.
So the AirPods.
No, I have the Bose noise
Bose.
canceling. Yeah,
Nice.
a little bit better sound
And what are you
quality.
listening to when you're working out?
Uh, I don't know. I think I like a lot of house music, hip hop. Things that kind of get my heart going.
Nice.
Yep.
Love it. Okay, you're from Seattle, right?
Yep. Born and raised.
Born and raised. And tell me about your childhood.
Yeah. So I grew up in a suburb just south of Seattle, Kent. My dad was an engineer at Boeing, so and most of the people I knew growing up had some affiliation with Boeing, and lots of my friends' parents that worked there. And I only moved once as a kid, and so I lived pretty much in that area the whole time.
It sounds like a very stable, like kind of, it's like 70s, 80s type of upbringing.
Yep. My dad only worked at one job, Boeing, for 45 plus years.
Yeah.
And my mom was actually a military brat. She traveled a lot, and I think she was probably tired of doing that. And when I was, I don't know, middle school, she wanted to go back to school and became a family counselor. So
Oh, wow.
I always say that I think what's helped me, at least at this point in my career, is having a dad that was an engineer and a mom that was a counselor. Because in any given day, I'm dealing with some of those
Putting
those
out
dynamics.
fires
Yep.
and yeah. And so are you more like your mom or more like your dad?
Definitely more like my mom.
More like your mom.
But I scratch my head a lot, and I love my dad to death, but I don't see a lot of similarities at all between me and my dad.
Yeah. Was there a part of him? I mean, we're going to get into your career because I know that you did kind of the big company thing after college and then went into the entrepreneurial thing. But when you pursued your entrepreneurial endeavors, were your parents like, what are you thinking? You need the stable job?
Not really. I think my parents always knew. I mean, I worked at a very young age. My parents, I think, instilled work ethic in me pretty early. Like I didn't have cable. I didn't have a Nintendo. I didn't have any of those things that almost all my friends had. And when I really started pushing it, I remember when I first got my first Nintendo, the first Nintendo. I wanted it really bad. My mom would not buy it for me. And she goes, "Tell you what, if you work all summer, I will pay for half for your birthday, but you have to earn the other half."
I love that.
And so I started working. I felt like I was 12. I had to
What
be
types
doing
of
these
jobs? What types of random jobs?
We had big yards. So, I grew up with 5 acres and we moved to have an acre. And so we had a riding lawnmower. So I was mowing lawns at like 13. And it wasn't just my yard, my neighbor's yard. So I think most of the time I would be doing that kind of work. And I think that helped me to just know that if I wanted something, I had to work for it. My parents weren't just going to give it to me.
Yeah.
Then I actually did carpet cleaning, which is a disgusting job.
Yeah.
But again, you learn a lot about just hard work and what it actually takes to do that kind of work.
I ask friends this. Do you ever feel conflicted as a dad now? Like you're going to raise your kids in a different socioeconomic environment, I guess, than you were raised in. How do you create that grit in them?
Yeah, and so I think about this a lot. I have a 8-year-old daughter and a 5-year-old son. And it's a lot harder because, we don't have, as a kid, I used to have to work in our yard all the time. My kids don't have to do that. And so, what we do is create tasks for them already, even a few years ago, where they have to go out and like pick up after our dog in the backyard. And they were like, "Dad, I'm not doing this." I'm like, "Well, yes, you are."
Yeah.
And tell you what, I'll pay you to do it. And so I think, we tried to really instill in them like, why do you work for things and what does that mean? What is the value of things? So they understand that everything isn't free. And what's the difference between a need and a want? And I think that was something that my daughter's starting to really understand, which is great because she says, "Oh, I have $100," and then she wants to go buy something. And I say, "Okay, well, what's the cost of that? Do you want that or do you need that?"
Yeah.
And so
You'll start to see she'll want to spend your money and not hers. So
Yeah.
That's what my son's like. I want it. I'm like, spend your own money then. He's
That's
like,
right.
yeah, no, that's okay. I'm like, you obviously don't want it that bad.
Yeah, so I think that I try to, even at this age, trying to kind of just get them, I try to make it playful and a kind of a learning exercise. I don't take it, overly seriously, but I want them to start to understand what things cost. So we'll go on a family vacation or we'll do things and I'll tell them what it costs so they actually can understand.
Do you tell them things like how much the actual vacation costs, like real money thing? Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, we went to Disney.
Yeah.
We went on a Disney cruise a few years ago and
those are
I told them
exorbitant.
like they're not cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah, and because I want them to understand those things, I think.
The value of the dollar. Yeah, that makes sense. Sometimes when I talk to people that think of their childhood and think, I was the kid who didn't have XYZ that my friends had, it can almost be something that fuels them. Like, I will be that kid, or I never want for anything. Was that something that you were fueled by?
I think for me, it's more, I don't feel like there's this ladder that I need to climb. I like to build things. I'm pretty creative. So I see things and I see solutions to problems. And I think that's more important to me and that motivates me.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And how did you do in school? Were you a good student?
no, I mean, you ask most CEOs, I don't think most of them are good students. So I think
Don't listen to this, Max.
Yeah.
Like this to my son. He's always like, I don't need to learn this. I just need to learn the basics.
I think you learn failure. You accept failure as a part of life and how to learn from it, and that's definitely me. I got in a lot of trouble as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
If things were bored to me, I just turned them off, and that was challenging. In high school, I took a bunch of business classes. I'm like, I really like this stuff. And
What kind of stuff was like my son is not feeling chemistry. And he's like, I'll never use this again, Mom. And I'm trying to figure out life lessons here. And I'm kind of like, yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah.
Because I'm not using it.
History, things like that. I love biographies now. I love to learn about especially entrepreneurs and what actually built America. I think that's all very fascinating. But a lot of things, I'm like, why do I need to know this?
Right.
So it's I always need things that are applied that I can understand, and if it's just kind of theory or, I tend to get really bored. So
Yeah.
I think that, learning from failure and not looking at it as an absolute, like, oh, this is the end. No, I just learned how to overcome that mistake. And so
Yeah.
that's a challenge. I have two different kids. My daughter is very much like my wife. Never wants to fail. My wife is probably a 4.0 student, forever. So her first response to anything is no. And then I usually come back, like an hour or two later, what do you think? And then she's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And she's starting to think about it differently. My son was more like me. And so it's tough as a parent because I'm trying to think, how would you parent me? I don't have a good answer to
I wonder
that.
how your personality type, based on how you're describing yourself, would do in today's era. Like with the instant gratification and the quick knowledge and the ability to, you could really start a company so easily now, right?
Mm-hmm.
The technology and all the tools are there, and there's not really the barrier to entry that there used to be.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It'd be interesting to see how much sooner you would have been a technology entrepreneur, maybe instead of mowing lawns. I don't know. It'd be interesting.
Yeah, I think if there was the ability to have those tools, if I knew how to code back then, yeah. I mean,
Are you going to want your kids to learn that stuff, or are they not kind of inclined in that way?
I believe one of the biggest challenges, especially in the U.S. and the things we need to be teaching development and coding as a basic necessity in elementary school.
I completely agree.
I think you want to talk about how we put America on the map and make sure we are,
Not failing.
Not failing.
Yeah.
That is it. And you start there. And I think that's the issue is everyone's talking about all these other things that can help impact America. But we should be teaching kids how to code just like we teach them basic math.
I completely agree.
And so we've put my daughter especially in some code classes just because I think that's where it starts. I think by the time you're older, it's a little too late.
Yeah.
But
we did it, and my kids were like, but I feel like they're going to be left behind in a weird way if I don't get on them about it. Anyway, so did you have any teachers growing up that impacted you either negatively or positively, like told you you're not this or you are that?
I'm trying to think of teachers that I love. I mean, definitely in college, I had a lot more professors that I really appreciated. As a kid, like I said, it was probably more negative, probably more of people telling me, or telling my mom especially, hey, he's not paying attention. He's kind of checked out. And, does he have ADD? And my mom, given her profession, I think she realized that that it wasn't that. It was just I was bored. And that was the truth. I was. And so I think that's a big challenge for me is when I'm bored, you know it.
You know it.
Yeah.
You kind of check out. And how would you describe your family values, and how have those shaped you as a person and as a leader?
I definitely I'm a big believer in integrity. Like my word is everything, and so if I say something, it's done. And so I think that is a big one, and that's one I feel like if I'm working with somebody and they don't have that's a big kind of deal killer for me.
It sounds like work ethic, big one.
Yeah, work ethic and drive. I really, I think my wife is like that. We're a pretty good team. We're different in ways, but we're very focused on our family and our kids and just making sure they have as much they can grow. Having a growth mindset, like especially at this age, having young kids is we want to give them everything. Like my daughter and son are doing chess. My daughter is in cheerleading. She takes art class once a week.
Yeah.
So we just try to get them exposed to a bunch of things, knowing that at the end they may not gravitate towards.
And it's such a gift. Like sometimes when you realize that these days kids are so stressed out and they're so anxious, and some are completely overprogrammed. But if there's not that pressure associated with it, and it's just with the intent of exposure, it's like this. What a gift! Like if I wasn't working right now, I feel like I'd be taking so many classes. I'm in that mindset of like life is short. Let's take it all in.
I've always had a dream of just sitting in lectures. Like I'm a coug, but I would easily.
I'm a dog, so that's okay.
My wife's a dog too, so that's fine. I've always had a fantasy of just sitting in a class and just sitting there. No one would know I was there. I'd just go in there and learn for a day.
Why don't you go there instead and teach in the entrepreneurship program, which is a lot of tech entrepreneurs that are in that program teaching, and you would be such a gift, especially because that would be like, ha, cougs, look who we got.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I've actually spoken a few times there. I think in terms of full-on teaching, I don't have enough hours in a day to commit to that. But at some point, I would definitely love to pay it forward.
We're still on the childhood thing because I'm just super fascinated by this. What was your kind of idea of success when you were a child, or do you remember? Was it stability? Like, did you look at your dad and go, "Wow, look at that stable"?
I wanted to. I think it's probably most kids. You always want to live a better life than your parents, and so I lived a really, fairly privileged life. My mom was really into me. I did a lot of different things. I took private art class pretty much almost my whole life. So,
are you still doing any art on the side? As a way to
I think that.
Product design.
When I started OfferUp, I designed it, the whole app, the name, the logo, all that. Now we have an amazing design team that just definitely take it to a whole nother level. But so I miss some of the pixels, but I still am pretty engaged on that level. And I think the art of building a company is a pretty creative process there. So
yeah. And so. Do you have any memories that are relevant as far as who you have become as a person of your grandparents, your ancestry? Are you attached to that in any way?
No. I actually have an extremely small family.
Yeah.
I have a sister and I have
a few
oldest? Cousins. I'm the oldest, yeah. And I have a few cousins that I don't really chat with, and that's it. I don't really have an extended family. Luckily, my wife she's Vietnamese and she has a large family.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot more time hanging out with them, but I have a really small family.
Yeah. It's interesting when I'm always really fascinated by culture in general. And my husband and we're both Jewish, but he's Persian Jewish. And that's just like almost a different culture. And the Vietnamese culture is really strong. Mm-hmm. Have you been able to incorporate some of her traditions or her family traditions into your home?
Yeah, so I think what I've observed, spending time with my wife and their families, they're very big, and like food is a big thing.
Oh yeah, everything's centered around food.
So my wife is an amazing cook, and I am not. I am.
You get to eat it,
dreadful,
and it's also healthy. Like that'll keep you in good shape, right?
So exactly. So I eat. I'm blown away all the time. My wife will just whip something up, and it's really, really good. So we'll go out to eat, and it's kind of like, yeah, I get this, every night. So I think I'm very spoiled, and I know that. So that's a big part of our house. I always try to get home for dinner most of the time when I can. She mostly makes traditional food, but
like what? What's their favorite?
So anything, spaghetti, like
traditional American.
Yeah,
food.
American.
Oh,
food.
I thought you were talking about Vietnamese food. I'm like,
her mom does. Her mom makes all. I'll go over there and I'm eating like very authentic Vietnamese food. So.
And that's super. I feel like that's super healthy, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And so, how did you meet your wife?
So I used to work at T-Mobile, and there was a coworker of mine who literally sat right next to me. And she was having a holiday party, and she said, "You should come." And I'm in my 20s, and I said, "Well, are there going to be girls there?" And she's like, "Oh yeah."
And are they going to be hot?
Well, I asked, "Let me see some pictures." And then I actually saw her in a picture. I said, "Okay, yeah, I want to come."
Oh, that's awesome.
that was one of the benefits of working at T-Mobile is that's how I ended up connecting with my wife. We went to a holiday party and met her there.
Next thing you know, boom.
Yep.
And so I know you went to Wazoo. How did you choose to go to Wazoo?
So I think a few things. I think growing up, I just wanted to get away. Like I wanted to really get far away from where I grew up. And like I said, I had a great childhood, but I was just on a different path, I think, than most of my friends. Most of my friends didn't go to a college. And so I didn't really have plans on going there. I looked at a handful of schools. And then ultimately I had a girlfriend in high school and she was like, oh, we should go check out Wazoo. So it was nothing more than that. And I just thought it was a beautiful place and I connected with people like on this one weekend we went there and I really just enjoyed, I think, just the kind of camaraderie and just the people there.
Mm-hmm. And you studied management information systems. What is that?
Yeah. It's basically a business degree. Think of it like a business degree with a minor in computer science. So you have to do, a lot of development, database design.
Did you enjoy that? Or how did you have the foresight to even know that was?
I had just, keep in mind that when I started college, I got my first email address. This is where we were.
No, I get it.
Yeah. So that's kind of the time in history. And so I kind of saw the internet kind of like, this is fascinating.
But that is real insight because I did and didn't. I mean, I did and kind of realized it was a thing. But I look back, I'm like, why even just registering URL names? Like, why didn't we just take them all?
Exactly. Yeah. And so I just felt like it was coming and it was big. And, when I joined, when I first started going to college, it wasn't the biggest degree, I think, in the whole in the business program. By the time I graduated, it was. So it really ballooned and became pretty significant. But I feel pretty fortunate that I use most of the things I learned. I think a lot of people, clearly, you get a degree and you're lucky if you use 10% of it. I've had to use pretty much all of it. And,
that's great.
And I think a lot of it clicked for me once I got out of college and started kind of building companies. I started to apply everything. I'm like, accounting, like I need that. I need to understand how all these different things work.
Yeah. And how did you end up, did you do the kind of recruiting thing out of college that people do? Or how did you end up getting your first job?
So I was in a fraternity, and there was a guy there that started a company doing web development. And so keep in mind the time in history we're at. Most people, one, they didn't know if they needed a website. Two, we were doing a lot of database-driven websites, and people are like, why do I need a database? Like this is kind of the time in history. Now, so I graduated, and a lot of people were going to work at consulting companies like Cambridge at the time, Anderson, and they were making, I want to say, like $50,000 a year. I went and worked for this 26-person startup in Tacoma, Washington.
Tacoma Aroma.
Yeah, Tacoma Aroma, making $27,000 a year.
Yeah.
I could barely pay rent.
Did you live in Tacoma?
I lived in Federal Way.
Yeah.
That was right out of college. So
is that your WebEx experience?
Yeah, that was Web-X, not
Web-X.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I say, is what feedback I give to people that are graduating, don't follow the money right away. Get experience, join a small company, because I'm very confident I wouldn't be here today if I didn't work at this company.
What did you learn? Like, why?
Because at a small company that size, you're forced to try everything. You're forced to figure out what you're good at and what you're not good at. And so I figured out really early, I was managing like these large projects. Like we rolled out a ticketing system for Paramount Parks. And so Paramount has all these theme parks. They had no online ability to buy a ticket at the time. So I had to figure all that out. I had to go present to these execs at this company. I had to manage this project across multiple parks and make it all work. I had to lead teams inside. I sat next to a woman who taught me how to code. And so I would learn how to code like during my time there. And then probably because I took art class my whole life, I was pretty good at kind of designing things. So I self-taught myself Photoshop. So, within like a year and a half of working there, I knew I could lead projects. I knew I could actually code. I knew I could design.
Wow.
I could,
great for your confidence.
Yeah. So I'm like, man, I can build a lot. I'm not a hardcore engineer on the back end, but I can do a lot of this, and understand how all the parts fit. So, I very much believe that, yes, it sucked at the time because I was making half of what all my friends were making. But I think I was exposed to so much.
Think of those people now, your friends, right? They've got like exponentially that 2 to 3% increase year over year.
That's right.
So where are they now versus like the confidence that you got? I love that. I never really thought about it in those terms, and I like it.
That's why I tell people I think when they graduate, we have a lot of interns that come through and whatnot, and I say, like, go work at a small company. Like, you can always go to the big company, but the problem at the big company is you are not going to be stretched. You're going to be, put in the box.
Yeah.
And you're
Well, it's also like, as a recruiter, I can say that a lot of our clients who are startups don't really love people out of big companies because sometimes they're just too much in the box. And like, I need you to be kind of a Swiss Army knife. I don't just need this one thing.
Yeah.
We have to be able to go deep and wide.
Yeah. We call it kind of the startup stomach.
Yeah.
And, one of our core values at OfferUp is, adaptability. And I think in a big company, when you're in a small company, it's all kind of chaotic, and you're trying to get things to normalize and kind of on a healthy kind of path. I just think in a big company, a lot of the hard problems have been figured out. Yeah, there's still plenty of other things that need to be done, but when you're much smaller, there's a lot more kind of ambiguity.
Yeah. It's also hard, I think, a little bit in those bigger companies to really innovate and to fail, to let yourself fail, because you've got these like layers of bosses. And I've never worked in a big company, actually. It's just not for me. I already know that about myself. I can't do that in the box. Kind of, that's how we're supposed to work things. Web-X sounds like it was a really good experience. How come you left there?
So, it was early. It was .com crazy days. And so they had a hard time kind of scaling that business. So I was there for a year or two. The whole .com bubble happened. Yes. And you just didn't need that as much. There's a lot of other tools and stuff. So that company, I think a lot of those, there was multiple web development companies back then. I think that kind of whole kind of model eventually morphed and evolved. And so I moved on from there. Yeah.
And so you did the Microsoft thing. And then I was surprised to see T-Mobile. I don't know why. I've never really even walked in the doors there. We're talking to them about doing some work together, but I have this impression that it's like super corporate, also very cool company. What was your experience like there, and what did you think of the culture?
Yeah, so I think, if you look at the wireless industry, I think you have to think about like, okay, what is the asset there? It is spectrum. It is waves, right? It is the infrastructure in which it lives on. So, unfortunately, that means in the walls of a company like that, just not a lot of innovation. There's not a lot of excitement.
Yeah.
And so, at the time, to be honest, I just needed a job, and I had a friend that had worked there. And what I was interested in, it was back when they were VoiceStream, and they were morphing into T-Mobile. So they were building out the whole basically web team from the ground up. They had like a 5-person web team. So I was like, this could be a really exciting opportunity to kind of go and kind of build this whole new website and infrastructure from the ground up. So that part I thought was interesting. So I did that for a while. I think to be honest, I think again going back to early companies versus big companies, like I didn't learn a ton in my time at T-Mobile.
Yeah,
at all.
And did you have that entrepreneurial itch that whole time?
Constantly, yeah.
Constantly.
And so I already had that even before T-Mobile, but. I would jam out at work all the time. I would go work at coffee shops on my own little startup, and it was one of those where I did not give them 100% of me. I knew what my task was and what I needed to do. But to be honest, like I was like, I think there's better things. They can fire me tomorrow. Like,
were you the kind of person who would walk in or who would just be finding holes in businesses and be like, oh, there's an opportunity? Yeah. Or were you just like creatively thinking of these new ideas that had never been done before?
Yeah. So again, going back to even my childhood here, this was a delicate balance where I would come in and there was so much opportunity, and I'm like, how do I kind of surface these things? So a good example would be, we had 18,000 customer care reps when I was there, and I was responsible for managing customer care on the web. How big do you think the customer care on the web team was? It was me.
Oh, geez.
And so I'm here, and I'm like, well, can you tell me the top 10 reasons people are contacting us? Why don't we find ways for them to self-serve? What an amazing off-the-wall concept, right?
Yeah.
2 years had gone by, and I would go up, meet with execs at the time, and I would say, like, this is not that hard. Let's figure out a way to get calls out of the call center. And at the time, they had really bad customer service. So what did they do? They hired more people so they could respond faster.
Yeah. That would, based on what I know of you, make you crazy.
It was
right?
making me nuts. And I'd even had a boss at the time that said, Nick, you need to just calm down and be more quiet in the meetings.
Yeah, good luck.
And so that's a challenge I have where, again, I'm not trying to be overly aggressive, but when I see opportunities that I think make sense, I think that's hard in the bigger environments.
Yeah, and it's hard if you feel like it's like soul crushing if you're passionate and driven.
Yeah.
So tell me about Connects and DealSpringer, two startups.
Yeah. So, I started Connects. So rewinding the tape. So back in the .com era, when I was working at WebEx, I started doing these big networking events. So we're doing one in Bellevue, one in Tacoma, and we get like 200 people together every month and do these events. So I did probably 30 of these over a few years, and it was kind of an accident. I had a guy that I'd worked with at T-Mobile, and he said, "Hey, why don't we just spend $600 and get one of these going?" And then before you knew it, because of the environment we were in, Cisco and Sun were giving us like $10,000 to sponsor these events every month.
Oh, that's awesome.
We're like, "Oh, this is great!" And so for a while, that was interesting because we were making pretty much as much money as we were in our day jobs, kind of just doing these tech events.
Yeah.
I think the other learning from that was it forced me to get in front of people a lot. And so I feel pretty comfortable being in front of a crowd. So it was a learning, from that experience. But I think through that, I realized that like networking is really inefficient. Like, and so, you're meeting all these different people. It's like kind of like dating, and you're like, well, where do these opportunities kind of exist? And at the time, there was no concept of social media. Like we were way early.
Yeah.
And
because this was 2006.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we kept thinking, man, why are there like thousands of dating sites? Like underneath the hood, they're all the same.
Yeah.
And so we said, well, what if you could build a platform that would connect people kind of online? And that was Connect. So the challenge in that business, and when I look back on it, I think that I learned a lot of what not to do, which has helped immensely, I think, in building OfferUp. It's not to say I don't make mistakes, but hopefully far less. But there, I think, a lot of startups is timing. We were very early. And back, I was working at T-Mobile, and at night I just code all night long. I would come home, I'd code all night long. I'd code all weekend long, right? And I was building out what was going to be Connects. We had a team in India, so I second mortgaged my condo. I used to live over here on Westlake, and I had a team in India that would work while I was at work during the day at T-Mobile, and then I'd pick up at night, and we just kind of did that for a while.
And what about you had a co-founder?
Yep. And my co-founder was helping to connect with investors, and so that was helpful. So at some point, kind of, everything kind of came together, and we started raising money, and I just quit working at T-Mobile. But our vision was, hey, we can all connect online. We were very early. Like we started before Friendster. Yeah.
Yeah. I was early on social media because I've been recruiting for 25 years. So I remember being on Friendster. I'm number 40,000 something on LinkedIn, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But it's like, what was the difference at the time between LinkedIn, Friendster, Facebook? They're all kind of blended together.
Yeah.
What was the other one? MySpace.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what ultimately happened with that business?
Yeah, so we went, and I like to say that the challenge with that business was we spent most of our time fundraising, not building a company. We had 56 angel investors. It was painful, and so ultimately, I think we hired we had an office in Tacoma. We hired a bunch of people. I had moved on, and my co-founder and a big investor were running it for a while. We tried to create it more of a SaaS product, actually, for newspapers, because ultimately we realized, like, hey, we are not going to compete with the Facebooks of the world and others, but can we take this older, can we take newspapers and media sites that are kind of not engaging, and can we bring engagement into them? And we did a bunch of tests with various newspapers, and it was great. We saw a massive increase in just kind of how people engage with it. The challenge clearly is that's just, an industry that is slow to move.
Yeah.
And so I ultimately, I think I went to a convention once, and I met with a guy that was running like 600 newspapers, and he told me that social media was a fad. And I think on that flight home, I emailed my co-founder. I said, I think it's time for me to move on.
Yeah. And DealSpringer was something you started?
Yeah. So to be clear, DealSpringer, think of DealSpringer as simply the V1 of OfferUp.
Oh, okay. Got it.
So when we started...
That was just the original name and the original concept?
Well, because like when you had... The concept was always, why is value sitting all around us? Why is it in our homes? Why is it in businesses? Why is it in storage units? It's sitting there, and it's bigger and bigger and bigger. It's not getting smaller. And my belief was we all make time value decisions, but... and some stuff is just sitting. Like we can get into some numbers here in a minute, but so our thought was, how do we unlock all this value? And so we started with a B2C model because we thought that if we could get merchants on the platform, we'd have just a ton of local content, and that would bring consumers. the challenge we had with, going that route to start was we also entered into this space when Groupon was at its height. So everyone heard the name Deal, and everyone thought, oh, this is Daily Deals. And I'm like, no, you're enabled to just take a picture from your phone, and that sales rack, Mr. Merchant, you can now promote to the local community. So, ultimately we pivoted back to the original idea of getting into consumers' pockets with OfferUp. But, think of Dill Springer as kind of the V1 of what ultimately became OfferUp.
Yeah. Got it. You said, let's get into some of the numbers. I, in starting to do some research, have looked at some numbers that are just profound about OfferUp. I know you started it officially in 2011. And then I also read that you have a co-founder, correct? Mm-hmm. Is that co-founder still?
He's an advisor to the business now, but I've known him for a long time, even back at Connects.
And when you were starting it, were you clear on what lane you belonged in? Because it sounds like you weren't doing the fundraising at the other company. And you're well-rounded. It sounds like I'm creative. I can do product. I can get in front of people. You're not really back office. You're kind of everything. How did you decide that you were going to be CEO, and what was your understanding of your role then, and how is it different now?
Yeah. So what I would say is not my strength is I'm not a hardcore engineer, and that's where I think if you're starting a company, like I was blessed to have a co-founder that was very good at figuring out all these various aspects of setting up AWS, and in the summer he built out the Android app. Mm-hmm. Like he can just go into things and figure out those things. And I think that was a huge benefit because I was it's a yin yang scenario here. So our first year, I literally I sat there and grew out the biggest beard you'd ever seen. I just coded in my pajamas like every single day, and my co-founder did the same. And every now and then, because it was pretty isolating, we'd say, hey, let's go grab coffee. Let's get out of the house. Yeah. But in year one, we built a website. We built an iOS app just between he and I. And I wouldn't say it was anything to write home about, but it was functional. Yeah. And so, yeah.
And for those who, I said it in the intro, but for those listening who randomly, I've done some analytics on this podcast, and there's people listening from all over the world, which I don't know how they even find it, but what is OfferUp exactly, and what's the business model? How do you make money?
Yeah. So, our view for OfferUp is to be the largest local mobile marketplace. And so, our view and the problem we're solving, to be clear, is way bigger than classifieds. And I get it. I think a lot of people, if they think about OfferUp, they think of it as a kind of mobile classified business. But that's very kind of short-sighted. Think of this as a bus stop along the way to a bigger vision, which is, why is value sitting everywhere? Like before we walked in here today, we walked by a whole bunch of stores. No one knows what's in those stores. So how do we help those stores to at least make those things visible so people can decide, if I'm looking for a bike, do I want to get it from somebody down the street, or maybe I want to get it from that bike shop we walked in past when we came in. So I think there's just still a huge opportunity with local, and I think that there's a lot of opportunities to go missed because it's not worth people's time. And that was exactly my scenario when I started OfferUp. I had a room full of stuff. I had a wife with a daughter on the way, and
nobody wanted to deal.
And I'm standing there in the doorway thinking, kill me, how am I going to sell all this stuff? Mm-hmm. And we were given the gift of a smartphone, which enabled us to reimagine the entire local buying and selling experience. So for me, I just wanted to take pictures and in like 30 seconds make them visible. At the time, the only alternative was 15 minutes on a desktop platform, right? That's slow, and so I was.
You mean like Craigslist?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so today that's still the case with that.
I'm like you, I can't deal, and so I just want to put it out in my front door, just let somebody take it, and if we make some money, great. If we don't, great. I just need it out of my face. Yep. But sometimes I wouldn't want my kids to have some stranger come, and I know that safety is a big priority for your company. How do you do that?
Yeah. So, we built the whole company around two core pillars. One was simplicity, and the other one was trust and safety. And I think both matter. And when I think of simplicity, it's time. So taking a picture is one thing, but what about using maps and chat? If you add it all up, we're saving people a tremendous amount of time, again, because of the smartphone. And so That's a very core part of it. The second part is trust, because we're bringing millions of people together every single month. And at this point, we're bigger than any large city in the U.S. So, when you think about, issues that could arise, like it's never going to be zero. But we want to feel like we're equipping buyers and sellers with as many tools to make an informed decision so they can then decide who they want to meet with. And so, we do very basic things like you have a profile, you have ratings at the end of transactions. Did you show up on time? Were you trustworthy? Were you communicative? We go even further than that. Even before we raised outside funding, we built a program called TrueU, which is a two-step process where we ask people to verify their ID, and then the second step is it takes a selfie. And we do some image recognition to make sure it's a facial match. If it is, you get this special badge on your profile.
Oh, that's great.
Member. And to be clear, we did it at the time. I think the company we used to help us do that was doing ID scans for casinos and like real estate. And we said, has anyone ever done this on a phone? And they said, not that we're aware of. And so I think we were the first company to ever do this. And we knew, again, because we were so small, that most people wouldn't do it, but we wanted to stand behind trust. We knew this was such an important thing. So over time, now we have a lot more people that are doing it. But I think that was an important step. We also have rolled out, over 2,000 community meetup spots around the U.S. And so if you're chatting back and forth over an item, we recommend these vetted places to meet. And if you go to those, you'll see a big OfferUp green dot on the ground. And so, we partner with retail stores, even some, police stations. And so not only does it help buyers and sellers save time and figuring out where to meet, but we also have a vetted, trusted location with a camera, and it has to be well lit.
And tell me about the payment process and efficiencies and inefficiencies with that.
Yeah, so payments, I think, in the U.S. overall is a frustrating place at the moment, in my view. If you look around the rest of the world, it's just leaps and bounds, much further evolved than where we are. So we offer kind of two kinds of payments. One is shipping, so you don't have to get in the car. And so we still run into a number of people that say, I just don't even want to meet anyone. And so we enabled shipping a little over a year ago. And the benefit of that is you don't have to drive across town if you don't want to. You just put something in the mail and it comes to you. We also have in-person payments, so you can simply walk up and scan a QR code and pay the other person.
But what's facilitating that on the back end?
Stripe. We leverage Stripe to do that.
Okay.
So that's very new. There's a lot more.
So
to be
nothing with
out
Venmo
there.
or PayPal or.
Today we offer credit card, Apple Pay, Google Wallet. Yeah.
And what about your plans for international expansion?
So today we're very much focused on the U.S. We think there's still a lot of growth opportunities here. As I mentioned, we're continuing to just evolve our product and get deeper into some of these markets. So I think their international opportunities are interesting, but I think the U.S. is, at least in the near term, definitely going to be the focus.
Yeah. And what are you, I guess, most proud of? You've got, a list of ridiculous amounts of awards and recognition and the unicorn coming out of Seattle. What are you personally most proud of as far as what you've built?
I think there's probably two things. So I think the impact we're having on people's lives, I love the stories. We went and just did a...
Give me a couple. I love these stories too.
Yeah, so this is a random one. We literally just had an exec offsite because we're doing our 2020 planning right now 2 days ago. And there's I'll give a plug for this shop in Soto here called Lawless Forge. I don't know if you've heard of this. We went and built knives. And you can build swords in there. I'm talking
Wait,
like
you did this
blacksmithing.
as your outing?
Yeah.
Oh, we love this kind of stuff. I'll go do it.
Oh, it was so fun.
Yeah.
So we go in there and we're, it's like 6 of us and we're getting ready to do this. And the guy's just raving about OfferUp. He's like, most of this shop was all purchased from OfferUp.
Oh, so cool.
And I'm like, wow. And so, you look at the numbers, which are exciting, but then you meet somebody and you're in their environment and they're touring you around for all these, and he just has stories the whole time. So we're there for 3 hours. It was a mutual exchange of information where he was asking a lot about OfferUp and he just kept telling me stories of those things that he's
That's got to make you feel good. You're like, look at all these people I'm impacting or this idea. And like,
Yeah.
working in your pajamas, and here you are.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, because early on, like it took years before it really got momentum. Now I love, I wear a lot of OfferUp gear, so I love just walking around, in an airport or at a coffee shop.
And people stop you?
Yeah, most of the time.
Wow.
Yeah, if you look at Seattle, almost I'd say 20% of the adult population in Seattle uses OfferUp every month. So the probability of running into somebody that's probably using it at the
And
moment is very high.
do you feel proud to say, like, I'm the CEO, or do you feel like you want to be kind of more under the radar?
I usually just say I work in
work
product.
there.
I work in product. That's
I work
what
in
say.
product. You're like, I'm humble. I work in product.
Yeah.
So I'm also blown away, if this number is correct, 261 million in funding. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And what has that process been like for you? Do you enjoy it?
Fundraising is never easy. I don't think anyone would say they enjoy fundraising.
But are you, I tend to ask it because I'm just curious, because some personalities seem like they'd be better at it or kind of have more fun doing it because it's storytelling and it's selling.
I like the process of presenting the opportunity and OfferUp. I definitely do, but I don't think anyone loves fundraising. Like it is a grind. It's a lot of work. I mean, I feel very blessed if you look at our list of investors to have that list. Like, and I have nothing but the huge respect for them, and to have them involved with their insights is been great. But but fundraising is hard. It took us 2 years to raise our Series A. We were hand-to-mouth feeding for 2 years, and luckily we were persistent and we stuck with it, and timing worked out. But that was rough.
Yeah, and you had people. It sounds like, well, a wife and employees,
and my daughter. Keep in mind, I just had a daughter
who stuck by you and who believed in you, and that's got to also feel good. Just like that.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing I'd say about being an entrepreneur is you have to have a supportive, significant other, because there was many a days where she was like, "Hey, when are you going to start paying yourself a decent wage here?"
Yeah.
And so we'd have conversations like, "Hey, do you want me to quit?" And she's like, "Oh, no, keep going." Right. So that's always one. I think you go into it thinking, "Oh, by this time this is going to happen," and then you realize it always takes longer. Some things you can't control.
Yeah, definitely. And tell me about the culture at OfferUp and how you've been deliberate about creating it and how often you revisit it.
So I spend a lot of time now on culture. If we go back to even a few years ago, it wasn't as important because we used to sit around one big table. Like it just, I didn't feel like I had to be as deliberate about it.
Well, you've gotten big, and so now you can't have your finger on the pulse in the same way if you can't see everybody's eyeballs and kind of.
I think a few things. So for one, if you walk into OfferUp, it is a museum of the product. So, we moved into a new building, about a 70,000 square foot building a few years ago, and we kind of gutted it and built it for how we wanted. And we then split up the entire company into teams, and we furnished the entire office of 50 plus meeting rooms and all the open space from OfferUp. If you walk into OfferUp, aside from maybe some of the screens on the wall and laptops, everything is from OfferUp.
That's super cool. When we post this on social media, I want you to post some of those pictures of the office. I've actually, whenever I've met with people at OfferUp, I've always met at that little coffee shop, Dilettante.
Oh, yeah. That's great.
I've never been in the physical office, so now I have a reason to come by.
Yeah.
Go check it out. And what about recruiting? Is there a common thread among someone who you feel would be successful at OfferUp?
Yeah, so, I mean, I was just kind of describing kind of
the culture.
The office, and why is it like that? Because we want people to really use the product and understand what works well and what needs to be improved. And so that's you see that in the office. We also put on the walls who's dog fooding or who's testing things before our customers do it. So there's kind of a wall of shame. Like I'm one of the top people that finds bugs, and like that bothers me. I want more people to find more bugs before our customers do.
I'll go try to find some bugs for you.
Yeah, okay. Hopefully you don't find any because we've done it in advance. But so that's one thing, is just using the product. I think the other one is getting really clear on values. That was something I'd say a few years ago. We started with values, and now we actually have operating principles as well. But we have 3, which happen to be driven, neighborly, and adaptable. And that's what we look for to even become an employee of OfferUp. And it was one that I think at the time the exec team sat around, we said, who are some people that are successful here? What are the attributes they have? And so we looked around, and luckily it happened to be DNA too. So just driven, neighborly, and adaptable. So that made it easy. Mm-hmm. And, when we think of driven, we want people that have this growth mindset, whether they're at OfferUp or somewhere else. Like
they're curious.
They're curious. They don't like the status quo. Like they're hungry.
Mm-hmm.
Neighborly is we kind of have a no jerk policy. Like we're all in this together. I don't sell off in the sunset.
Assholes need not apply.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't sell off in the sunset without anyone else. And then again, adaptability. Like in a startup, nothing. As soon as you fix one thing, 6 months later, you got to refix.
6
you
days later.
6 days later.
Yeah.
So those, I think, are really important things. Now, the challenge is once you get deliberate about that, then you look at everyone through the company through that lens. And so we started to get a lot more focused at that time. You could have been an amazing person and really an amazing developer, but you were just a jerk. And we started asking people to kind of move on. I think before that, we were just lucky to have people.
Right.
Then we started getting intentional about culture. And then this year we rolled out our operating principles. And those are more like, once you're there, it's, again, not just how you're performing, but how are you showing up and how are you working with others? And so we have a handful of those, but it's everything from like, being scrappy, pursuing excellence together, working with people, diving deep. I mean, these are things that I think matter at all levels of the business. So we've gotten a lot more intentional with not only interviewing, so we brought that into the interview process,
and
but also performance.
I'm super curious about that because I'm trying to learn also. How do you measure for those things?
So what we have done is, we've created a whole list of ways to interview for those, and then we split it up within the interview loop. So maybe your areas dive deep. You'll have like 2 or 3 questions you're going to ask that are kind of probing for those, and then we put that into the recruiting tool. We're just trying to get a sense of kind of how did these things show up, and it's clearly not an absolute science, but we're just trying to get examples of how do these people think, and then when we debrief, we hopefully have a pretty good spectrum of how do this.
And who has the ultimate decision-making power? Is it the hiring manager? Is it based on kind of the group consensus?
Yeah, so I think at the end of the day, it is the hiring manager. But I think clearly we really look for everyone's feedback. So when we're debriefing, we can always change our vote. So we usually do like a 1 to 4. 1 is like, hell no, you hire them, I'm going to quit. A 4 is like, they're amazing. So I think that I've been in quite a few debriefs, and I think the hiring manager in general, hopefully has a good 360 on what they're thinking about there.
Yeah. Well, it's a constant challenge. And as you know, in this kind of war on talent and especially with engineering, with Facebook and all these other companies coming here to build out engineering teams, you got to be as competitive as you possibly can. And I think that the CEOs who engage significantly in culture and in recruiting are the ones who are winning, and the ones that we feel like psyched to partner with because they're ready to close candidates. No one's too kind of low level for them to get in on it.
I spend 3 days a week recruiting.
Oh, that's great. I mean, that's huge. A lot of CEOs say that they do, and then we're like, hey, can you call this guy? He's got 2 other offers, and they're like, they don't do it.
I meet with candidates on the weekend over coffee.
That's great.
I think the most important thing right now is team, especially, and to your point, I've never seen a job market like this. So
it's crazy. Yeah,
you need to not only sell candidates, but you got to make sure it's the right culture.
Yeah. Well, I'm super psyched to have you on the podcast. I've been told, because I don't know you well, that you walk the walk and talk the talk, and you're the real deal. And it's been super fun. But I have a final question for you, which I ask everyone, which is ultimately what fuels you?
I like, I think to ask the questions on why, and like I like the puzzles. Like I like the Legos. I like the hard problems, and I think. There's plenty of times that are extremely hard, but I think looking back, like, oh, man, I persevered and overcame that. So if there's ever a day where, OfferUp becomes, a massive company and I'll just grow revenue 10% this year, it's probably not for me. Like I need the hard things to solve. And I think that's what gets me excited in the morning.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you feel that you already are a huge success, because it's incredibly impressive what you are building, what you have already done, and it's incredible. So thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
Of course. Thank you for listening to the What Fuels You podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, and follow us on social media to keep up with the latest news and episodes. You can also contact us at podcast@fueltalent.com to provide feedback, ask questions, and share topics or guests you would like us to cover in the future. We hope you feel inspired by our guests and that we have helped fuel your day. Join us next time for another episode of What Fuels You.